My Greyhound freezes on walks. How to stop statuing now. At the words walking the dog, the scene we picture is nice and relaxed, with the dog ambling ahead on the leash, sniffing here and there as he goes. That's why so many Greyhound owners are completely stymied when the Greyhound suddenly halts, stares into the distance, and just doesn't move. Today in the Greyhound Homecare channel, we're going to probe the deepest recesses of the Greyhound's psyche in search of answers to this baffling behavior. You may be surprised when you hear that a Greyhound who freezes on his walk is not, contrary to popular belief, paralyzed with fear. I'll shed insight on how this highly receptive animal senses something of interest, and then a positive feedback loop evolves between him and his concerned owner. I'll give you the inside baseball on how this cycle is broken by neither reward nor punishment, but by overriding his distraction with another distraction, rapidly followed with confident but kind leadership, the key to preventing future incidents of statuing. Don't despair if your Greyhound statues on walks. I'm going to teach you the reasons why it happens and plenty of strategies for avoiding it. Watch on and make walkie time happy again. Misconceptions about a Greyhound who statues. The number one reason for problems between a Greyhound and his owner is the assumption that he's been traumatized by racing. This is generally untrue. In the course of writing over 75 articles on Greyhounds, my research consistently finds the quirks of Greyhounds to be common across various breeds of dogs. To misplace blame for a problem is very dangerous because then that problem is never exposed and adequately addressed. It's kind of like if you had a toothache and decided to blame it on a food allergy instead of seeing the dentist. Misinterpreting the reason why a Greyhound is freezing is the glue that cements this frustrating behavior and the dog firmly in place. Then that behavior is made even worse by our own emotional mishandling of the event. I know how you're feeling. I've been there myself. This week, actually. So let's have a look at the most common misconceptions of this problem. Misconception number one, fear. Greyhounds were built to run away from their fears, not to stand there and gawk at them. If your Greyhound's frightened, he's more likely to try to bolt than to just stand there. Misconception number two, defiance. No, it's not personal. When your Greyhound's statuing, frankly, he's not even all that aware of you, your presence, or your concern. Misconception number three, dog training's mean. The best way to stop a dog from freezing is not to let it happen in the first place. Many Greyhound owners feel like they're being mean if they take control of the walk. After all, he's had a hard life, they think, and it'd be wrong to browbeat him. Let him enjoy his retirement, right? Well, sure, but he'll enjoy it a lot more under the protection of your confident leadership. The dog training is mean notion confuses leadership with domination. When a parent takes a child's hand to lead him safely across the street, would you call that an act of cruelty? Providing your pet with good leadership over his lifetime is an act of caring. Concerned that training is mean, some owners fail to train at all. This form of compassion is totally lost on a Greyhound. What happens is then the owner can become frustrated and the dog senses it, and the next thing you know, the dog can feel indecisive and just sort of shut down. Ironically, this leads to a disconnect between the dog and the owner, and it's in this disconnection that freezing habit can take hold. The game-changing thing that you have to know to stop the statuing and improve your bond of trust with your Greyhound is this. Greyhounds inherently understand that there's strength in gentle leadership, and that is the only kind of leadership that they're going to consistently respond to. If you find that your psyche is responding to this video, you may feel strangely compelled to hit the forever free subscribe button as well as the thumbs up. Any suggestions for future video topics I'll consider, so leave me a comment as to what topic you think would bring you better living with your pet Greyhound, or any breed really. Misconception number four, show the alpha who's boss. This advice misses the mark almost as badly as training is mean. The fact is, well, you do have to show them, but not so much who's boss, but kind of more like who's benevolent dictator. Bossy emotional displays are as ineffective as no leadership at all. In fact, a scientific study funded by the University's Federation for Animal Welfare revealed that companion dogs trained using aversive-based methods, they say, experienced poorer welfare as compared with companion dogs trained using reward-based methods. And this was true for both short-term and long-term training. In other words, training where the main goal is blind obedience rather than success causes more problems than it solves. Plus, pop psych labels like alpha tend to encourage a narrow view at the most critical time when the big picture is needed. The truth about why greyhounds freeze, or statue. Simply put, your greyhound will suddenly halt his walk because something's distracted him. Greyhounds are so sensitive in so many different ways that it can be very hard to figure out what he's reacting to. These distractions, though, do fall into two distinct categories: external and internal. Let's look at internal distractions first. To the untrained eye, a greyhound may indeed appear as if he's frozen with fear. More often, however, he's caught a scent or he's spied something interesting. As a sighthound, he can see a half a mile away and has 1/3 wider peripheral vision than you do, and they have a very curious nature. Here are some very common things which quite literally will stop a greyhound in his tracks: the scent of other animals, trash, or food; a sharp percussive sound, even if it's far in the distance; the sight of a small furry animal; a place where he previously saw a small furry animal, even if that animal is no longer there, and even if it was on another day, month, or even year; a place which reminds him of a different place where he once saw a small furry animal at some other time, even if he's never been to that place before; the sight of something along his regular route that's not normally there. This can be a garbage can, something that's blown into the path, a pile of leaves, or even a lump of snow that's melted down from how large it was the previous day. A place where somebody stopped to pet him once. The end of a driveway at a home where somebody lives whom the greyhound likes. Not to weird you out, but I've even seen my greyhound freeze as he watches something cross a few feet in front of him, except there's nothing there. I'm not sure what to conclude from that. Maybe that greyhounds see things we don't, or maybe that they hallucinate. I don't know. They also sense when somebody they love is returning to them. I've seen this happen many times. Recently, my neighbors were returning home from Florida after being away for several weeks, and I didn't know which day they were actually going to come home. But when I took Lily for her second walk that day, she turned left instead of the usual right and started pulling toward that neighbor's house. At the time, they happened to be on the road traveling, not to arrive for another 3 hours. It's an easy mistake to make, though, since the neurochemical response in the brain of a keen greyhound is similar to that of a human having a PTSD reaction. And that's not a term I throw around lightly. Sadly, PTSD is very common among our active military, but this tragic trend has led to a ton of accessible research on the subject. Since scientists actually use the dog's brain processes to learn more about how our own brains function, we can use some of that research here. The phenomenon that occurs when your greyhound comes to a standstill is what they call a positive feedback loop. The error that triggers this vicious cycle is the owner's reaction when he interprets his dog's keenness as, quote, the heightened arousal and hypervigilance which characterize PTSD. Now that quote is from a paper about human PTSD by Dr. Patricia Miller, but the neurochemical reaction that causes PTSD in humans is, as I said before, what takes place in your greyhound when he's feeling keen. It is, however, anything but positive in the way that we think of that word. Here's how it works. Check out my infographic here. First, the dog senses something very interesting. Second, the dog stops to assess and consider it. Third, the owner interprets this behavior as negative somehow, as though maybe it's fear or defiance. 4. So the owner's mood shifts to the negative. And back to number 1, the dog senses something, except this time what he senses is his owner's negative mood shift. Number 2, unable to comprehend the owner's change in mood, the dog stops and freezes to assess it. So now you see the cycle and how it repeats. I've taken the following concept straight out of an Anatomy and Physiology 1 course, and I'll paraphrase so it makes a little more sense in a greyhound context. Positive feedback loops are naturally unstable. Because the greyhound and his owner keep reacting to one another, the positive feedback loop can lead to runaway conditions. The term positive feedback is typically used as long as this interaction continues back and forth, even if the dog and his owner have no idea that they're the ones causing the problem. In most cases, negative feedback is psychologically harmful. And I want to interject for the owner and the pet. So each subsequent interaction of this kind is just going to amplify that feedback loop. Well, fortunately, Dr. Miller's solution to PTSD for humans lines up with the key to breaking your Greyhound's freezing problem. So here's how it works. You see, Dr. Miller explains that the only way to reverse a negative feedback loop is with a positive feedback loop. So the opposite of that's true as well. To reverse the positive feedback loop that you and your Greyhound have when you're reacting to each other, you need to break this paralysis by analysis cycle by creating a negative feedback loop, also known as a distraction. Physical reasons why Greyhounds freeze on walks. But before you start this psyop on your Greyhound, be sure to rule out any physical causes for his stalling. If your dog's not feeling well, he's likely to stop. When this happens, he's either waiting for you to fix his problem or simply wishes to go back home. If freezing up is a new behavior in an older dog, he might be starting to want a shorter walk these days. And some days will be better than others. It's okay to let your Greyhound decide when it's time to turn around and go home. Greyhounds have tender paws, even after years at home, and it's not unusual for something off the ground to become embedded in his paw. If your Greyhound stops suddenly, look at how he's standing. Some Greyhounds will elevate the paw, but more often, they'll just be subtle. You may observe the afflicted paw standing slightly ahead of its mate, or he'll lean a bit to take weight off of it. Don't forget to check between his toes and along the sides of each toe, because it's not unusual to find a stone, an acorn, a thorn, or a tick. Some Greyhounds feel uncomfortable walking on certain surfaces, for example, uneven surfaces, which are tough on arthritic joints. Indoor smooth floors are hated by many Greyhounds. If you clip that tufty hair between their toes and apply a dog-friendly moisturizer to his pads, that can help him feel more comfortable on these types of surfaces. A stony path can really zing a corn on a Greyhound's paw. Discomfort on asphalt can be a sign of either of these problems. And finally, a Greyhound who walks slowly on pavement rather than bouncing along might actually have inflammation in his ears from an ear infection or seasonal allergies. So there's two things you might not have heard before. The Greyhounds can get corns, and that they can have allergies that are so bad that they stuff up their ears. Another sign of that is their eyes might be watery. That's always a key that your Greyhound might be having some allergy problems. If you suspect any of these outdoor problems, try walking your Greyhound on the grass. If he improves, you might be onto something. If you can't locate the source of his pain, then it's time to explain his problem to the vet and see if the vet can figure it out. Here's a pro tip about corns. If you rub a thin layer of toothpaste into each pad and then wipe it off with a dry paper towel, that will reveal the corns. You see, the residue left behind will outline any corns in their distinctive round shape. And here are some ideas for stopping that statuing. You can try walking him in a tight circle. You can walk him with other confident dogs. You can train with a clicker, a whistle, or a sound that you choose from your cell phone to train the dog heavily and in a variety of environments. Like with toddlers, your reaction or interaction can really turn it around. Try talking playfully about the object that might be distracting your Greyhound. Say, "What is it? Are you going to get it?" Play along. Try to anticipate when he'll freeze and head off the problem by shortening the leash and quickening your steps. Trying to pull the dog along by his collar can only make things worse. These dogs can be incredibly stubborn. I probably don't need to tell you that. You'll need to change his focus to get him back on track. Here are two better strategies than collar pulling. In the first one, you stand alongside your Greyhound next to his head and distract him by sneaking your foot up behind you. In other words, you stand with your feet together and then just pick up your foot so it rises up behind you, and with the side of your sneaker, just gently tap, give the dog a little tap on the flank. I'm not saying kick the dog, but just give him just move your ankle and give him a little tap on the flank, because he'll have no idea where it's coming from. I've had this be very effective in breaking my Greyhound's attention and getting him back on track. Second, if all else fails, you can use a gentle leader. That's the pink horse harness thing that you see on Lily in so many pictures, like on the thumbnail for this video. It works great in these situations. I've even seen service dogs in them. It presses on the dog's neck from behind. It doesn't hurt, but it's a feeling that they don't like, and they instinctively respond to it. And oddly enough, what doesn't work is trying to distract the dog with food. For some reason, even the most food-hungry, food-driven Greyhound When this is going on, they just will snub food completely. Cesar Millan, the famous dog trainer known as the Dog Whisperer, provides the following practical rules for successful stress-free dog walking. Number 1, you go first out of the house, both coming and going. Second, use a short leash, and I find that to be true. I use a 4-foot leash, and most of the time, as you'll notice in videos of me walking Lily, there's a lot of slack in that leash. 3, teach your dog that sniffing around is a reward that he gets after he's done all his business. And finally, leave enough time when you go out for your walks so that you're not feeling rushed. Greyhounds pick up on that in a snap, and they will get so balky and stubborn you won't believe it. Here are some resources for further information that I used to research this video. Here's that Anatomy and Physiology 1 course I told you about. Here's Dr. Patricia Miller's article on feedback loops and affect regulation in trauma recovery. The next one is that study I mentioned. It's called Does Training Method Matter? Evidence for the Negative Impact of Aversive-Based Methods on Companion Dog Welfare. And finally, the article with those tips on dog walking from dog whisperer Cesar Millan. So leave me any comments. If you try some of these techniques on your dog, let me know how it's going. Let me know if you need any more help. I'm always here for my viewers. If I've left any tricks out that you found to be effective in the past, then share them with our viewers. But most of all, remember 2 things above everything else. First, patience. Patience, patience, patience is the name of the game. And secondly, always remember, you're smarter than the dog. And I'll see you next time on the Greyhound Homecare channel.